This is a continuation of Story 5 from Part 1. Link in the description. I had my eyes closed as I rocked, but then I heard a dull footstep. I looked up, obviously startled, and saw him standing only a few feet away from me. He was massive, probably about 6'4", and had a large but not fat build, like a football player. In hindsight, it's amazing that I hadn't heard him approaching sooner, or smelled him. For a second, all I could do was stare in horror and gasp out incomprehensible words. Then I screamed. It only took him a second to cross the distance between us, but I didn't even have enough time to properly get up before he had his hand around my throat, choking me. For reference, I'm not particularly big. 5'3", 132 pounds. I'm not skinny but not fat either. To him, I was nothing more than a little rag doll. I wasn't even sure of what was happening, but I was being jerked around by the neck and arm. His hands were huge, and every place he grasped and pulled felt like he would snap something. When the movement stopped, I was in his lap with my head pressed against his chest and one of his legs partially crossed over me. He was half cradling me, half grappling me. I was too dazed to make a sound, but when I tried, his hand would tighten over my throat again. I went still for a few moments, but then I felt his tongue against my throat. He smelled rancid, like beer and something decomposing. I struggled to get free again, but this time he pinched my esophagus between his thumb and forefinger. It was light at first, but then he started increasing the pressure. By the time he was done, I felt like I was going to pass out. I don't want to go too much into detail because the memory is still hard to revisit, but he went back to licking, groping, and kissing. It was traumatizing, but he never went for anything too intimate. I gave up on trying to scream or get away, but he would still occasionally choke me. I sat there and simply sobbed. Then, possibly even more disturbing, he started to hum and rock me. I'm not sure why this part bothered me so much, but it did. His voice seemed higher than it should be and his hum was rather nasally. I don't know how to describe it. Then, just as his humming was becoming almost frantic sounding, I saw headlights and he stopped. Somewhere in the distance, it looked as if a car was heading our way. He also saw it, and I felt panic well up inside of me, worried that he would drag me off somewhere, but he didn't. He simply let me go, stood up, and walked the opposite way into the trees. Without him supporting me, I fell back slightly and watched them walk off. The sun wasn't up fully yet, but there was enough light to make out more of him than I had been able to before. He looked as bad as he smelled. Dirty, sagging jeans, a white hoodie that was so stained that it looked brownish gray, and medium-length brown matted hair. I didn't see his face at all because I had kept my eyes shut for the entire time he had me. I could hear the car getting closer, and I stood up. About 30 feet away was my flashlight, and where I had been sitting, and I realized how far he had taken me when he pulled me around like a doll. I could see the car lights through the trees, but they suddenly took a left and panic set in again. I was worried that he would come back if he saw the car wasn't coming to the campsite. I started to run. I didn't even care about staying on a path or a road, just as long as I could still see the car. I caught myself in a few bushes and scraped myself falling a few times, but the pain didn't even register. I was too desperate to care. It felt like forever, and I don't know how long I actually ran, but I ended up getting close enough to the car that the couple inside noticed me. They stopped, and the guy got out. I remember not even being able to talk. For a while, I was just shrieking at the poor guy. Even before I could tell them what happened, his girlfriend had called the police. Everything after that seems like a blur now. The couple drove to the parking area, as told to do by the cops, just in case the man was still around. The sheriff's department showed up, took my statement, took me to the nearest station, asked for another statement, checked me for evidence, called my mother, and contacted the fire department to break into my car for me. Just as my mom and friend arrived at the station, a sheriff's car pulled up, and in the backseat was the man. I was promptly pulled back inside and asked to make a positive identification. It wasn't like in the movies though. They literally just brought him up to me and asked, "This him?" Now this part still leaves me extremely emotionally confused, but it is what it is. As I looked up to him, he wouldn't meet my eyes. He looked ashamed, confused, and oddly vulnerable. And then his eyes started to tear up. I knew something had to be wrong with him mentally, and in a weird way, I actually felt some sympathy for him. I did confirm that it was him, but afterwards I actually worried enough about him that I asked about what would happen to him. This is where sympathy flew out the window. He was indeed mentally unstable, as I found out, but he was also a convicted sex offender. Yeah, I actually lucked out with what little had happened to me. Looking back, it seems more like a dream. My mother and friend took me back to my car, and rather than being stuck in a car with my mom, I opted to let her drive my car back, and I rode with my friend. The entire drive back, she kept drilling me for more information, but I couldn't bring myself to even talk about it. I still don't like talking about it, and I refuse to ever go camping again. I'm also extremely paranoid about always having my key on me when I step out of my car. Not a funny, haha kind of paranoid, but literally, it's now a compulsion to check to make sure I have my key with me. I usually have to check 3 times to satisfy myself. As far as the guy goes, he was admitted into a psych hospital, and I hope he remains there. Number 7. I'm writing this on my mobile, so it'll probably have some errors. It's like 4 a.m. as I'm writing this, so please forgive me. I was 14 years old at the time, walking with a friend of mine on a main street probably at 1 a.m. We had snuck out of our houses. A truck passes by with guys in the back, and as they pass, they all start yelling random things. They drive by and stop about 25 feet up. There were 6 guys in the truck, 2 in the front, 4 on the back tailgate. They are saying something, but we really can't make it out. The truck goes into reverse and is coming towards us. We turn and run around the corner, then I pulled my friend into an alley, but the alley had no exit. We hide side by a dumpster, leaning back towards the wall. We hear the truck drive by like 3 or 4 times. It's been a good 10 minutes in the alley. We're looking at each other, not really knowing what to do. My friend wraps his watch around his knuckles. I have a 4-inch pocket knife. At that moment, I thought to myself I might actually have to use this. I don't know, it was a weird, short feeling. Soon, the truck pulls up in the alley. The doors open and close. We hear whistling and feel the adrenaline rush. Waiting for something to happen, the guy hits the dumpster with a bat, making an unexpected noise, but surprisingly, it didn't really affect us. We see 4 guys walk up in front of us, the other 2 probably watching out or something. They looked at us and said, "These aren't the same guys." They started laughing and saying, "My bad, I thought you were the guys from the party." One of their friends was saying that we were them, pretty sure they were all drunk. But the other guy said, "Nah man, these are young ass kids." They offered us beer and we accepted, but ditched them later. We started walking back home like 3 blocks away, and the cops pulled us over and said we were past curfew and drove us home. Number 8. I used to walk around my city late at night. Most times, I would leave my house without much of a plan, often just meandering through the neighborhoods and businesses until I decided to go back. It was my usual routine on the nights I couldn't sleep, and although the area where I live has a fair amount of crime, I never felt unsafe. For reference, I'm a guy. One time, I left around 1:30 in the morning and headed toward the shopping center. I'd like to listen to podcasts, so I had my earbuds in, and I was walking with my head down. Out of the blue, I got this eerie feeling that someone was watching me. I took a look around, but I didn't see anyone. There weren't any cars around, though the spot I was passing through had enough of a glow from streetlights and signs that I could see there was nobody near me. I continued on my way without giving it a second thought. About 15 minutes later, I was nearing the far edge of the shopping center when the feeling came back. This time, when I looked around, I saw a girl a little ways behind me. She was on the phone and walking the same direction as me. She was still pretty far back and looked to be in her early 20s. I ditched the earbuds so I could be a little more aware of my surroundings, and I kept going. I figured she was probably just walking home drunk, but I wanted to be able to hear if she came up behind me. I was a little bit surprised when she caught up to me. I hadn't been watching, so she must have started speed walking to get to me as quickly as she did. I moved over to the side so she could pass. Instead of going in front, she fell in step and walked next to me. Like I first thought, she was a few years younger than me, but looked a little strung out. Her hair and makeup were kind of crazy, and she was wearing a short skirt and t-shirt despite it being really cold. She asked for money and then started telling me some far-fetched story about how she had been kicked out of her apartment and needed help. I wasn't buying it and was trying to figure out how to lose her when I noticed she was looking around a lot. Specifically, she was looking at a spot not too far ahead of us. That sent up a red flag for me. Against my better judgment, I kept walking with her in that direction. Right when we reached the last building in the row, a man stepped out from around the corner. I tried to ignore him, but he came right up to us and started talking. He looked nervous too. Although they didn't say anything, it was clear they knew each other. The guy kept telling me to stop and talk to him. I did the best I could to blow him off, until he demanded that I stop. There was nowhere else to go, and I knew he wasn't going to back off, so I stopped and said, "What do you want, man? I don't really feel like talking." He said, "You don't have a choice, bitch," and showed me the gun he had in the front pocket of his pants. He told me to give him some money. I told him I didn't have any on me. I didn't. So he said to empty everything from my pockets onto the ground. All I had were my keys and phone, so I set those down and stepped back. The girl picked them up and shoved them into her purse. Then she went through my pockets and felt around to make sure I wasn't hiding anything else. Now, getting robbed is definitely scary, though I felt all along they never planned on shooting me. The thing that happened next is what stuck with me. The guy told me to face away from them and lie down on my belly. He said not to get up until I counted to 100. Then he said, "Don't call the cops, dude." I told him I wouldn't. He said, "I'm not fucking around, Joe." My real name. "I know where you live at." And he gave my accurate address. I heard them run away, and I stayed there with my nose on the pavement for a good 20 minutes to make sure they were gone. I imagine they could have been watching me for a while to find out where I lived, but to this day, I can't figure out how he knew my name. This happened to two friends of mine about 5 or 6 years ago. They lived at an off-campus apartment that had a dumpster where you'd go dump your trash. One day, my friend went outside to take out the trash and noticed a really foul smell. She came inside and told my other friend that it smelled like rotting meat. A week went by and the smell hadn't gone away. Finally, when the trash collectors came, they found the dead, naked body of a woman who was between 70 or 80 pounds, wrapped in a sleeping bag. We guessed she was probably on drugs and overdosed, and the person with her probably freaked out and threw her in there. No one has identified her yet. My friends lived there for another year. Number 10. I have been an avid Let's Not Meet reader for a while now, but never had anything worthy of posting. That is, until about 2 weeks ago. My mother came home late one night in a panic. She was sure she was being followed. Her story is as follows. I was coming back from a friend's house. It was about 2 a.m. when I left, and I had a bit of a drive, mostly on the freeway. I was the only one on the freeway, zoning out and listening to George Norrie. I didn't notice another car had joined me until they were riding right on my tail. I thought it was odd that they wouldn't just pass me since we were the only cars in sight. The car moved to the left lane, and I was relieved they decided to go around me. Until they didn't. Instead of passing me, the car stayed at my same speed exactly parallel to me. I thought it was a little odd, but probably just an accident on their part. The car was nothing special, just an old black car with a solo male driver. I decided to give the car some space and slowed down to about 60 miles per hour. From the left lane, he too slowed down until once again we were side by side. So I sped up to nearly 80. Within seconds, he gained speed and was right next to me. It became clear this was no mistake. The only thing on my mind was not being alone with this car. I sped up trying to catch up with any other cars on the road. In the way distance, I saw a tow truck which became my target. As I raced to reach the truck, the car was parallel next to me the entire time. I reached the truck just in time to see it signal and take the exit off the freeway. My mind was racing with every news story of drive-by shootings I had heard when I noticed the police car parked in the distance. The black car must have noticed it as well. He dropped way back behind me and got into the right lane. As soon as we both had passed the police car, the black car wasted no time in catching right back up. In hindsight, I should have pulled up behind the police car, but I had no idea what to say. That I was being driven next to? I had to lose this guy. I slammed on the gas and I was going about 95, and he was doing 95 right next to me. I was so scared, and I was driving way too fast, and I didn't know what to do. I grabbed my phone and started to dial 911. He must have seen the light from my screen because immediately he dropped way behind me until I almost couldn't even see his lights. I sped up, took my exit, racing home. I'm a little nervous he saw where I got off, but I sped home, so I don't think he was following me. I don't think there is anything I can do about it, except thinking twice about driving at night.